What happens when one of America's most beloved radio hosts comes face to face with entitled royal behavior on live television? In just 19 seconds, a single comment would expose the shocking truth about Meghan Markle's real personality, leaving viewers absolutely stunned by what they witnessed last night. This is the exclusive story you need to hear. The studio lights were blazing hot as Howard Stern adjusted his headphones, looking across the table at his guest. Meghan Markle sat poised in her designer outfit, that familiar smile painted across her face. But something felt different about this interview from the very beginning. "So Meghan," Howard started, his voice carrying that signature mix of curiosity and skepticism that made him famous, "let's talk about your new charity work. I have to ask, and forgive me if this sounds harsh, but do you ever get tired of being in the spotlight?" Meghan's smile flickered for just a moment. "Well, Howard, I think that's a rather unfair question. I've dedicated my life to service, and if that puts me in the spotlight, then so be it." "Right, but here's what I don't understand," Howard continued, leaning forward slightly. "You left the royal family because you wanted privacy, yet you're doing interviews, podcasts, Netflix deals. Help me make sense of that." The studio grew noticeably quieter. Even the production crew seemed to sense something brewing. Meghan's voice took on a sharper edge. "I think you're mischaracterizing my situation, Howard. We left because of the toxic environment and the lack of support from the institution." Okay, Howard said, raising his hands peacefully. "I get that, but what about the staff turnover? I mean, multiple reports of people quitting, complaints about your behavior behind the scenes? What's your side of that story?" "Those are tabloid lies," Meghan snapped, her composure slipping. "I will not sit here and be attacked by gossip and rumors." Howard's eyebrows raised. "Whoa, attacked? I'm asking questions, Meghan. This is what interviews are about. I ask questions, you give answers. That's literally how this works." "Your questions are loaded and unfair," she shot back, her voice rising. "You're trying to make me look bad." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Howard's producer gave him a concerned look from behind the glass partition, but Howard pressed on. "Look, I've interviewed thousands of people," Howard said calmly. "Presidents, celebrities, criminals, saints. Everyone gets tough questions. That's my job. If you can't handle basic questions about your public statements and actions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." Meghan's face flushed red. "Excuse me? Are you seriously lecturing me about how to conduct myself? Do you know who you're talking to?" And there it was, the moment that would define everything that followed. Howard paused, staring at her with genuine surprise. "Do I know who I'm talking to? Yeah, I'm talking to someone who agreed to come on my show for an interview. What did you think this was going to be? A puff piece?" "I expected professional courtesy," Meghan said icily. "Something you clearly know nothing about." "Professional courtesy?" Howard laughed, not mockingly but with genuine bewilderment. "Lady, I've been doing this for 40 years. Professional courtesy is what I show every guest by preparing thoughtful questions and giving them a platform to speak their truth. What it's not is pretending you're above scrutiny." The studio audience, which had been quietly observing, began to murmur among themselves. This was not going according to anyone's script. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and take this disrespect." "Sit down," Howard said firmly, but not unkindly. "We're in the middle of a live show. You can storm out if you want, but let's at least finish this conversation like adults." For a moment, it seemed like she might leave. The cameras captured every second of her internal struggle, her hands clenched at her sides, her jaw tight with anger. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, sitting back down with obvious reluctance. Howard took a sip of his coffee, clearly trying to reset the energy in the room. "Look, I don't want to fight with you. I really don't. But you came on my show, and this is what my show island. I ask real questions about real issues. If you want softball questions and compliments, there are plenty of other shows for that. Your questions aren't real. They're designed to humiliate," Meghan replied, though her voice was slightly calmer now. "How so?" Howard asked genuinely. "What question did I ask that was designed to humiliate you?" Meghan struggled for an answer. "All of them. The way you phrase things, your tone, everything." "My tone?" Howard seemed genuinely confused now. "Meghan, I've been speaking in the same tone I always use. This is how I talk to everyone. Watch any of my interviews. I don't change my personality for different guests." "Well, maybe you should," she shot back. The room fell completely silent. Even the technical crew stopped what they were doing. Howard stared at her for a long moment. "Maybe I should change who I am to make you more comfortable." "I'm just saying that different guests deserve different approaches," Meghan said, seemingly unaware of how her words were landing. Different approaches based on what exactly? Howard's voice was deadly calm now. Meghan realized she had walked into a trap of her own making. Based on their background and experience. Their background? Howard repeated slowly. And what about your background makes you special compared to, say, the war veterans I've interviewed, or the cancer survivors, or the civil rights leaders? The question hung in the air like a sword about to drop. Meghan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She clearly had no answer. That wouldn't make her sound even worse than she already did. That's not what I meant, she stammered. Then what did you mean? Howard pressed, his voice still calm, but with an edge that cut through the studio like a blade. Because it sure sounds like you think your royal connections make you too important for regular interview questions. That's ridiculous, Meghan said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it though? Howard leaned back in his chair, and anyone who knew his show recognized this posture. He was about to go in for the kill. Let me paint a picture here. You married into the royal family, complained it was too hard, left after less than 2 years, moved to California, and now you're making millions talking about how terrible your experience was. And somehow, in your mind, this makes you above answering basic questions about your choices? The studio audience was completely captivated. You could hear a pin drop. You don't understand what I went through, Meghan said defensively. You're right, I don't, Howard replied. But I understand what a lot of people go through. I've talked to homeless veterans who lost limbs serving their country. I've interviewed single mothers working 3 jobs to feed their kids. I've sat across from people who've lost everything and rebuilt their lives from nothing. And not one of them, not a single one, has ever told me I should change how I interview them because they're special. Meghan's face went pale. That's completely different. How? The question came out like a gunshot. Because, she struggled, because their situations are what, Meghan? Howard's voice was getting louder now. Are more real than yours? Are more deserving of respect? Are more genuine? No, that's not. She started, but Howard wasn't done. Or maybe it's because they didn't have the luxury of walking away from their problems and signing Netflix deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The audience gasped. Even the camera operators exchanged shocked glances. Meghan's composure completely cracked. How dare you minimize what I've been through? You have no idea what it's like to be attacked by the media every single day. Howard laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. Are you serious right now? You're talking to a guy who's been called every name in the book for 40 years. I've had protesters outside my building. I've had death threats. I've been banned from radio stations, sued by everyone from religious groups to the government. And you know what I never did? What? Meghan asked. Though she seemed afraid of the answer. I never blamed everyone else for my problems. I never played the victim when people criticized me for my choices. And I sure as hell never expected special treatment because I thought I was too important for tough questions. The words hit like hammer blows. Meghan looked like she'd been slapped. You think you're the first person to be criticized in the media? Howard continued, his voice rising with righteous indignation. Lady, that's the price of fame. That's what happens when you put yourself in the public eye. You don't get to cash the checks and avoid the scrutiny. It's not the same thing, Meghan said weakly. You're right, it's not, Howard shot back. Because most people who get famous actually have talent or accomplish something meaningful first. They earn their place in the spotlight. What exactly did you earn besides marrying well? The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. This was television gold, and everyone knew it. Meghan stood up again, this time with fury blazing in her eyes. I will not sit here and be insulted by some radio shock jock who thinks he's better than everyone else. Shock jock. Howard stood up too, towering over her. I've interviewed presidents and Nobel Prize winners. I've raised millions for charity. I've built a career spanning 5 decades based on honest conversations. What have you built besides a brand around your own victimhood? I've dedicated my life to humanitarian causes, she screamed. Have you? Howard's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Or have you dedicated your life to talking about dedicating your life to humanitarian causes? Because there's a big difference between actually helping people and just saying you help people while living in a $16 million mansion. The audience was on the edge of their seats. This was the most brutal takedown they'd ever witnessed on live television. Meghan's voice cracked with rage. You don't know anything about my charitable work. Then enlighten me, Howard said, sitting back down and gesturing for her to do the same. Tell me about one, just one, specific project where you actually got your hands dirty and helped people without cameras rolling and publicists taking notes. Silence filled the studio like floodwater. I've done many things, Meghan said, but the fight was going out of her voice. Name one, Howard said simply. More silence. You can't, can you? Howard's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it even more devastating. Because it's all been about the photo ops and the press releases. It's all been about building the Meghan Markle brand. Meghan sank back into her chair, looking completely defeated. Howard leaned forward, his voice taking on the tone of a disappointed father. Here's the thing, Meghan. I wanted to like you. I really did. I thought maybe you'd been treated unfairly. But sitting here, listening to you demand special treatment and throw tantrums when you don't get it, I finally understand what everyone was talking about. What do you mean? She asked quietly. Howard looked directly into the camera, then back at her. I mean that maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't everyone else. Maybe the problem was you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Meghan stared at him with a mixture of shock and devastation, finally understanding that she'd been completely and utterly exposed on live television. And in that moment, 19 seconds of silence that felt like an eternity, everyone watching knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary. The mask had finally slipped, and there was no putting it back on.